Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Sidney Williams, author of Disciples of the Serpent from Virginia by Skype. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I am excellent. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for scaring me. Holy smoke. How did you get into writing like Lovecraft type of novels?
When I was in my formative years, I guess, in high school and college, I was interested in the detective story, and I have gone on to write some crime fiction. But I started writing detective stories, and I didn't think at that point that I had anything new to offer to the detective story that had not already been done. And so I started looking at other things that I had been passionate about and I had been excited about. And I had read Lovecraft in high school and enjoyed that quite a bit. And I had also read Stephen King around that time. And I noticed in Night Shift particularly that Stephen King was using things like the Necronomicon and some stories. And so I realized, I can use some mystery elements in tales like that, and I can do, my own thing as well. And mesh mystery and horror and spooky things. And so it became a chance for me to do something a little different than just another Private Eye story.
It's definitely that. Tell me about ORPHIC.
The OCLT series.
Yeah.
It is
the task force.
Yes, the Orphic Crisis Logistical Task Force. That Disciples of the Serpent actually fits into a bigger series from my publisher, Crossroad Press. And David Wilson, the godfather of Crossroad, came up with the idea for the OCLT series. And they are a task force, as it suggests, that respond to strange and monstrous events around the globe. They have teams that are ready to go to deal with giant monsters when they crop up, and all of the things that you sometimes see in monster movies. And David, I had done some work for David. I had books published traditionally back in the day. I guess I'm still traditionally published with a publisher, but David brought out my backlist, and then he started talking to me about the OCLT, and he gave me the OCLT series Bible. And I said, well, this would be fun to do if I can inject maybe one of my own characters into it and work with the task force and everything. And so that was kind of how my character, Eileen O'Donnell, came to mesh with Professor Bullfinch, who is part of the OCLT team in Ireland, a place that I had visited and love. I love the British Isles. And so everything kind of came together for the story that became Disciples of the Serpent.
Well, what's your background?
Varied.
Are you always a writer? Are you a full-time writer? Have you been a teacher, a college professor, or something completely different?
All of those things, really. There were not a lot of creative writing programs when I was a young person. And so I took the closest thing I could find, a communication arts degree back in the day. And I went into journalism initially, and I was a reporter for a modest-sized paper, 40,000 circulation daily paper, for 11 years when I was a young person. And I always knew I wanted to keep writing fiction, but that was a way to pay the bills and to have a day job, if you will. And so I went to work as a newspaper reporter, a general assignment reporter. I covered a lot of crime. I covered religion. So you see a lot of things kind of come together in my books for the things that interest me. I was an entertainment reporter there for a number of years as well, doing like weekly interviews with movie stars for our TV guide. And my goal was never to give up writing fiction. And it was kind of a brutal thing when I was young to work a day job that was newspaper reporting and write fiction. But that's what I did. I worked from 1 p.m. till 10 p.m, kind of the traditional general assignment grind. And happily, that allowed me to then take an hour off, start writing a while, and write till about 2 a.m. And then I would go to sleep, and I would still have a nice period to sleep. I would get up about 10, about 11, edit an hour, and then go back into work. And that was just ideal. And I wrote 8 books that way, or close to 5 books really, and then some young adults. I was on an 8 to 5. I worked as a newspaper reporter 11 years. I worked in corporate marketing for a number of years, and that was sort of a creativity killer, ironically, although I got to do some creative work during that. But I earned an MFA during that time, became a professor and a creative writing teacher for a while. I'm still doing that. A bit of comic book editing, freelance for creators that need their work edited, and then I write. And so I kind of have, kind of the best situation of ever for me right now. And happily, a lot of that you do from home. And so I've been able to, stay afloat this past year through all of the madness.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I can see how your journalist background ties into the way that you play out the story with the realism and the horror of it all. And then as a professor, that makes sense because it's so well written, and it really brings you along this chase into these just crazy adventures. But it's like it's so close to realism because, you read about that thing that washed up on the beach, or, that they found in a cave, but it's actually alive in your books. So that's worse.
Thank you.
But I just love the way the whole thing played out. It was really true to Lovecraft, where he just like pulls you into the story, and you're just looking over your shoulder and going, "Oh man, I shouldn't be reading this at 2 a.m."
Oh, yeah, probably interesting reading for 2. I tried to sort of blend that Lovecraftian flavor, and of course, there's always research and details that need to emerge in a Lovecraftian story, and I tried to have that going on and kind of blend it with high adventure. And so, as you mentioned, there is that aspect of the chase. There's an effort to reassemble a lost language and to unravel an academic conspiracy of sorts and a bit of an academic cover-up. And so tried to have all those things, keep everything exciting and moving as happily as you're saying, the pages turning with still that little taste of Lovecraft and that little creepy feel. And also building to something that was right for the OCLT series, an explosion, if you will, of events.
Yeah, there's definitely that. And without giving too much away, tell me how you researched the Scottish land law and the ley lines, and how you wove that into this adventure.
The ley lines are so much a part of at least speculation in a lot of paranormal research, and the notion that there are all of these things that are in alignment, holy places, sacred places, strange places, mystical places. And so that fit with the storyline just almost perfectly, because we are looking at it. It is Irish, Irish history a bit, and Irish legend, and happily a lot of new things have emerged in recent years about things like passage tombs and things of that nature. And I knew of ley lines from just reading with interest a lot of paranormal things through the years. And interestingly, some David Wilson, who I mentioned earlier, had deployed ley lines in some other stories, I think in one of the other OCLT stories as well. So it just kind of was a nice fit. And often when you research, you find, you have a certain idea in mind, and then you find that true history will, some kind of things, tidbits will pop up, and they align perfectly with what you were thinking about. And so all of those things were just kind of a perfect storm. And of course, you want to root a fantastical story as much with reality as you can. And so I certainly was happy to find real, true things that aligned with my storyline. There are, of course, things in Lovecraft, and we're steering just a bit away from Lovecraft. And there's an allusion to a pulp writer who is sort of a Lovecraft stand-in for this. It's kind of making its own world. But Owam, the old Druid language, which is straight line. The symbols are very straight lines, and there's some things in Lovecraft that look a lot like Owam symbols. And so that all just kind of fell into place. And I had never read it, but there is a Robert Bloch Lovecraftian story called Manuscript Found in an Empty House. And it ties in with some theories that Druids found their way to America. And there are some markings, and some theorists say, well, those look very much like Owam. And they say sometimes, since it's such straight lines, it may just be cuts in wood that were made. But all of that, just dovetails into the fictional world so nicely. It's fun when that happens.
Definitely. Are the lines of energy also a paranormal type of event?
They are. I don't know. Ley lines are viewed with some skepticism, and they are theoretical and paranormal in nature. And they are, in many cases, there are two ways to look at it. You could look at it that these holy places align because of the ley lines, and there are these patterns of energy that led people to choose these spots for sacred sites or for stone circles or whatever. And it could just be coincidental. And in a fictional world, you're just trying to draw on the reality and make it as as realistic as possible, and to make it consistent within the story. And so, and again, it's nice to have realistic theories at least to anchor to for a story you want to seem real.
I thought that's what made it really good, was that, like Lovecraft, you have that odd group that is chasing paranormal, alien, weird stuff around the world, and looking into that. And then you have all those elements that we've, read about or heard about with the paranormal world or aliens tied into it. So it seems more real, which just like keeps you going and pumps you up.
Sure,
and then, the evil dragon aspect of it, that was creepy and good. And it took place in the perfect part of the world to make it believable.
That is such an old world, because civilization was there and gathering. We had monastic settlements and priories and things that were there for so long. It does make it a great place for tales of that nature. And before I ever got to go to the British Isles, I talked to, when I was a newspaper reporter, I interviewed a guy who had been there. And he was from America, as I was, from Louisiana, as I was. And he said it had a profound impact on him when he walked into, a tiny hut, a stone structure, and he thought that, here is something that is 1,000 years old. And he had never, been into anything like that in America. And you do realize how close to history you are when you are, when you're in the British Isles, and you're going through, you drive through countryside where modern highways are cut, but you look out to the, to the side across a field, and there's a stone structure that's like that's been there 1,000 years. And I was in a museum when I was touring Ireland, and not necessarily at the time doing research for this, but you never are not doing research when you're writing. And went to a museum, and they had a display, and there was a farmer that was digging in his field, and he found an implement that was 1,000 years old or whatever. It was just digging around. In my backyard in Louisiana, if you dug around, you found a class ring or something. So just fascinating to think of how close history is in the British Isles.
Definitely. Was there anything from your travels to the British Isles that really influenced this storyline?
I visited a spot called Glendalough, which had some towers. There are some ruins in the storyline that are crumbling a bit, and we have good guys and bad guys racing to find different pieces of a lost language that will, of course, tie to what might be awakened, and what cultists and people pulling strings would like to see awakened. Glendalough is happily a nicely preserved set of towers and grave sites and stone structures and things. And so that was really the inspiration for a lot of the ruins that are dappled around Ireland and all of the British Isles, really. And I kind of envisioned some towers and obelisks and things that were in not quite as great a shape, which aligns with reality. And certainly was a religious settlement at its time. And some of the spots that are visited are old priories. And then, of course, some of the most sacred sites, and then some old stone huts that are just, beautiful to behold. And just all of that, and seeing any of the stones really, and any of the structures and partial structures that remained, stayed with me. And on my Facebook author page, there's a photo file of me standing around some of those ruins in a jacket and a knit cap, because it was very cold when I was there, even though it was March of the year. It was a cold part of the world. But all of that just, it awakens your imagination, and just taps. And there is a spiritual feel to thinking about, this is where people walked so many years ago. And just all of it was energizing to me for all creativity. And by the time I was ready to write Disciples of the Serpent, it had percolated a while, or brewed a while, and it all came back. And I find in writing, you never know what is going to be important, and things that are in the back of your mind that you experienced years ago might come back and serve story, which is, all about deciding what happens next when you're writing. And so, again, as I mentioned earlier, these perfect things fall into place and help move the story forward.
What advice do you give young people when they're embarking on a writing journey?
Two things are absolutely essential. One is read, and Stephen King will say this, and hence all of the books we were, I think, joking about before we started, or talking about before we started. Reading is essential. Stephen King stresses that, if you're not reading, I think he says you are not priming the pump. You're not using the tools you need to be a writer. And so you really need to be constantly reading especially as a young person, and you need to read a variety of things. You don't need to, fixate on one genre. You need to dip into things that are, outside of your comfort zone. That is by far the essential thing. As you read, things go into your mind, and you're observing patterns that you may not even be aware that you are observing, but you are absorbing the choices that writers make, the plot movements that writers deliver, and also the nuances of character. All of that goes in there. And if you take a writing program, participate in a writing program later, a lot of times what the writing program will do is label the things you already know if you've been reading a lot. And you will realize that, there's something that happens at a midpoint in a story, and there is excitement toward the end of the story, and that things get worse for the hero as the story progresses. All of those are there. And what, if a paradigm from a particular writing program or workshop or whatever you take is brought to your attention, well, then it's giving you the names for things that you already know. So read. Do not stop reading. Read comics if that's, a starting point for you. Read prose, read short stories, read novels, read trilogies, read everything. But the other just unquestionably essential thing is that you need to write every day, and it needs to be your job to write, and then everything works around that. As I mentioned, when I was a reporter, I worked 1 in the afternoon till 10 at night. And I worked with people that said, well, I wanted to write, and I became a reporter, and that became my thing. And I never wanted that to be all I did. I always wanted, because I loved fiction, I always wanted to be writing fiction. So I realized, I have to be determined, and you get very tired being a reporter and running all over the countryside and everything. But I realized I had to find a time of day that worked for me to keep writing. And so I realized, even though I had covered murders and fires and everything all day, realized if I could, come home, eat, sit for a while, watch a show, and then write, I was calm enough to write again. And then it became work into the wee hours. When my schedules changed, I became a morning writer. But you always have to find a time that you are there and you are putting words on paper, and it needs to be a part of your makeup. You just have to carve it so that it becomes a reflex, so that it doesn't feel right if you're not in the chair writing. And that is the, be all and end all of it. If you do those two, the other things will fall into place. Studying craft, taking classes, taking workshops, doing whatever works for you, enhances all that. But that's the groundwork and the discipline that you develop on your own.
Well, what are some of the benefits of belonging to groups like the International Thrillers Writers Organization and places like that?
They certainly bring some sense of community. And I'm in the International Thriller Writers, and I'm in Horror Writers Association, which was once Horror Writers of America, and now it's broader. Once upon a time, it was even called Howl, HOWL, and they kind of skewed away from that. But it offers a sense of community, and writers' organizations certainly do everything they can to help writers promote their work. And so ITW allows writers to, be interviewed for articles that go into the ITW newsletter, The Big Thrill, which comes out monthly. And there are opportunities to participate in discussion boards, which equals connectivity, and also opportunities to just meet other people and be exposed to their writing patterns and everything. I was a contributing editor to the Big Thrill for a while and interviewed tons and tons of people, and often would ask writers about their schedules and things. I talked to Karen Rose, who is a romantic suspense writer, and interesting to hear how she worked and how her ideas came together. I interviewed Eric von Lesbader, the author of The Ninja and many, many other books, and who's picked up the Bourne series since Robert Ludlum died. And so great exposure to those folks. I have many, many great friends who are part of Horror Writers Association. And there are conventions that when the world is normal that you can go to. And conventions are great because you meet other writers. So wonderful, just wonderful opportunities. And most writers' organizations have critique groups, which are wonderful to participate in. And I think having first readers is wonderful and lets you know if you're on the right track. So a big advocate of writers' organizations.
Oh, that's great. So how many books are going to be in the series?
OCLT is ongoing, and different writers have written books for them. David Wilson has written some. Aaron Rosenberg has written some, and David Bischoff, who, if you've read any novelizations like books in the Alien series, David's written some of those, and he wrote one of the OCLT series. So it will be around a while. And I have just written, I did mention earlier, I moved away from the detective story, but I have moved back and found that, after years of life experience, I had enough life experience to bring something new to the detective story. And so I wrote a book called Fool's Run about a detective character, and I'm working on a new book about him. And it blends mystery thriller and the caper story, where something has to be put together to pull things together. So hopefully a long series of stories about my character, Cy Reardon, as well.
How many books have you written so far?
I am saying now that if we count everything, it's an unlucky number of books. I have written 13, I believe, so I need to write more and get off of the mix. But
I don't know. I think 13's a lucky number.
And maybe that is. It's the reverse of the dangerous number, or the unlucky.
Right. Because it's not like you're on the 13th floor. That
True.
Would be unlucky.
That would be dangerous.
But thank you so much for sharing how you crafted this story. And until next time, keep asking questions. And if you want a great series just to really keep you up late, Sidney Williams, Disciples of the Serpent, Occult, will not let you down.